whenever thank you. So welcome everyone to the Mental Health Supports for BIPOC Students webinar. My name is Nicole. I'm a placement student at CICMH, and I'll be your host for the webinar. Today with our panelists, we will talk about the different kinds of mental health supports available for BIPOC students at post-secondary institutions and what still needs to be done. Before we begin, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge the land in which this webinar is being held. This land is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. Colonization and the subsequent mistreatment of Indigenous people in Canada has resulted in tremendous physical and mental trauma still felt to this day. I hope moving forward, the panelists and our audience use their positions as settlers in Canada and in working with Indigenous people and their communities to dismantle colonialism, no matter what line of work you are in. A couple of housekeeping notes. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen for submitting questions to the panelists. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. The chat function is for discussing thoughts and reactions. A recording of the webinar will be made available on our website and on our YouTube page. So if you miss anything, you can access that. Lastly, a survey will be sent to you at the end of the webinar. We greatly appreciate if you fill it out. So with that, we will start the conversation with our panelists, who will introduce themselves and give a short description of their program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shanicia Elias. I work at Trent Black Student Support at Trent University. At Black Student Support, we offer confidential weekly discussion groups for Black students to share in their experiences, their lived experiences, as well as we offer allied resources and wellness events throughout the school year, so that allies can also share in some of the experiences that Black students have to offer around the Peterborough community, the Durham community, and the Trent community as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jalen Rose. I am Shanicia's co-facilitator at Black Student Support at the Trent campus. As Nisi said, we do facilitate group discussions for Black students once a week. We also host different events, wellness events for students. We just recently did a yoga session, and last year we had a therapist come in and talk to the students.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I also work for BSS, but I'm at the Durham campus. We do a lot of similar things. We constantly have meetings together. The only difference that this is the first year Durham is running, so we're just still trying to build and grow and learn off of what the Peterborough campus has already done.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Guskowski. My pronouns are he or they. Feel free to use both, even in the same sentence. You get bonus points. I help run a program called You Belong Here that's operated out of the Peterborough campus of Trent University. It's a program that is founded on the idea that there are many students who experience really challenging situations related to discrimination and marginalization and social messaging that tells them they don't belong at university. And part of our philosophy is the idea that belonging is actually an integral part of academic success, and a positive, strong sense of belonging can have really positive impacts on students moving through and completing their studies, whereas a lack of or really tenuous sense of belonging can in fact have really negative impacts on that. In terms of kind of the students that we particularly reach out to, all of our kind of advertising is based on a couple of questions. Do you identify as 2S LGBTQ+? Are you Indigenous, Black, racialized? Are you a student with a disability? Are you a mature student? Are you the first in your family to go to university? If students answer yes to one or many of those questions, because of course part of our philosophy is also recognizing that intersectionality really impacts that sense of belonging and those kind of social messages, we offer a variety of things. We have student peers who are community connectors. They co-facilitate the workshops that we offer, and they also do one-to-one conversations and mentoring with participants. We have dialogue and social events where we have kind of a bit of a panelist introduction, but then the event is open for discussion for everyone who's there. Participant, panelist doesn't matter. All voices are welcomed and celebrated on themes like hard truths, bright futures, founded on the idea that there's a lot of really challenging things that need to be acknowledged and named in order to be addressed and changed. But also things like learning inspires change and thinking about some of the kind of positive outcomes that can happen down the road. And we also have some open discussion nights that are deliberately student-only space. So I go and welcome people, do a land acknowledgement, and then turn it over to the student facilitators, leave the room. There's no agenda for those. It's deliberately meant to be a space where students can talk about kind of any elements that they want to related to belonging.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lula Adam, and I join you from Edmonton, so it's Treaty 6 territory. My pronouns are she and her. So my official title with the U of A is Student Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Coordinator. But my position is situated within the Dean of Students, and my unit is the Wellness Supports team. So I'm kind of representing a little piece of everything. So the wellness supports, like many of the other wellness supports, have students will have access to one-on-one social workers. We create opportunities like for students to connect in various ways. So whether they need that social work piece, so they can do that. We also have a program called Unity, where we have a group of volunteers where you can book time with a student, and this is the peer-peer support, that you have their bios in terms of diversity of backgrounds, etc., and faculties, etc., and you can book time to have tea with them. So our team would cover the tea cost, and you share a little bit of conversation, and you walk away with a mug. So for those students who potentially might not want to go the route of a social worker, or they don't want the formal, but they're looking for informal ways, we have that Unity tea. We also have things like socials, like monthly socials, like ice cream making, etc. We're just trying to look at it from a holistic perspective, and having opportunities for people to connect in various ways. So we also do offer, because we're looking at a community, we offer trainings, mental health skills training for the community and the students, whether it's QPR, which is suicide prevention training, community helpers. We're very mindful of the fact that U of A currently has 40,000 students, and we will never have enough social or what is it, mental health support services to meet all the needs. So we're trying to find ways that the community can build their capacity. So my team is part of building that capacity of what does it look like to have a community as all helpers as opposed to one person. So that is the frame of mind that the team works from. So we do that peer-to-peer, we do the supporting during exams. So we have a program called I'm on Your Mind, where community members or staff can go around and give snacks to students while they're studying in libraries. Like, we're trying to find ways to kind of incorporate this community feeling within everything that we do. The other things, we do collective teas where you can have conversation on various topics. We set up, it's kind of pop up and people can sign up, or we could just be somewhere that people can socially connect. So because a lot of the pieces that from the research, loneliness, isolation, being overwhelmed are a reality, unfortunately, for a lot of the students. So how do we navigate that? In terms of the diversity within that, so my role is kind of looking at also how do we ensure that whatever we're doing, so in our training, what are the lensing we're bringing? Are we considering diversity of lenses and intersectionality while we're giving training, so that we're looking at a nuanced way of presenting the information? So even if we're doing the Unity tea, those are the conversations. The volunteers themselves, being part of a volunteer group is an opportunity to connect, but part of their training looks like, what is your identity? What is the privilege that you bring in? What are the places that you hold power? And what do you bring into those conversations that you're having one-on-one, so that you are a little bit more informed in having a more nuanced conversation? So those are some of the things we do. Of course, we have things like days of action, where we acknowledge as a community things or observe things like World Suicide Prevention, World Mental Health Day, World Hello Day, World Social Justice Day, International Day of Happiness. So we kind of look at various ways to infuse the community piece and different ways to engage around mental health and the needs of the various communities that make our big C community.
Hi, I'm Carla Gray. My pronouns are she and her. I am a Jamaican Canadian. I work as a counselor and I'm a registered psychotherapist, and I work at Centennial College. I'm part of an interdisciplinary team that also has a health and wellness program. And within that program, we serve students on various topics. We have peer support, peer listening component. And so it's run by students of various equity and diversity groups. And we've also expanded that peer listener group to involve our international students last fall, which has significantly enhanced our scope in supporting students. It's very focused on our principles around equity and social justice, social analysis, and implementing it in our college community. We have a variety of topics that are covered within the peer groups, ranging from perseverance, gratitude, self-compassion, and as well as learning success skills. Our fundamental place is around having students of a continuum of identities have a place where they can be supported and be supported by peers. Similar to my colleague at the University of Alberta, we have the same challenge in terms of meeting the mental health and emotional needs of students. So we have a stepped care approach where everyone in our Centennial College community has some components around health and wellness. Then we have the mandate around our students with intersecting identities, and then how best to support those students. And that is done through more advanced care, whether it be a counselor, but we have the health and wellness strategy and programs and peer supports in order to reach a broader part of our college community. Our peer counselors and our peer listeners, rather, are given training and supports by our larger counseling and accessible learning team. And then they work effectively with students, running groups. And of course, we have snacks and refreshments as an incentive to getting together and being more infused in our college community.
Oh, Mona, you're
Yeah.
muted.
My name is Mona. I'm Carla's colleague at Centennial College. So I share the PowerPoint, and part of them Carla already mentioned, but I just let you guys know. We work in the Center for Accessible Learning and Counseling Service, and we have personal counseling, accessible counseling, and health wellness program. So like support students, enable them to meet their need, the wholeness of their well-being and accommodation and disability related needs, all inclusive together. And we also provide a highly accessible service so that hoping then to able to let them to access the service when they need. And this health wellness program, I believe Carla already mentioned about that, like peer support. We have workshops and courses that all based on like a more educational training piece in a peer learning level. And we like really grateful this semester. I saw that we could 6 students, they become the peer listener, and all of them are our BIPOC students to like really able to support that the majority of our students. And we do have to earn while you learn, so a little bit incentive, let them to learning some coping skills as well as earn some money to able to pay a meal, right? Accessibility counseling service. Carla, would you like to speak about that?
Yes, so in terms of the wraparound services that we provide, we know that BIPOC students are not comfortable with the medicalized model for accessing accessibility supports. So our model very much is informed from a social justice lens, and it's student driven. So medical documentation is not a requirement for accessing service. And then we can work with the student in terms of the student's comfort and what the student wants or needs, whether it be more informal assessments that we have to support accommodation needs, or whether that student is pursuing licensing exams, whether it be in transportation or healthcare, and require more formalized supports. But it's all being done from a diversity and equity lens.
And of course, the main core service we provide will be the personal counseling. So we take a single section therapy and also the solution-focused approach to provide counseling service to students. And so meaning that we let students to know that they don't need to worry about it's a very burdensome treatment or ongoing service they need to complete, but rather is just at one time add-on. They really need the support and they can get it. And we provide a hybrid service, which very good that students have a lot of options. They can request it's just virtual counseling section or phone section or in-person session. And we also open, like student can walk in to, if we are available, we have the 1 day or same day counseling or like the other day counseling provided for them. And they also able to get the options to access our service with any like with the online system to self-booking or phone or email or walk-in or referral. Anything you think of, they are able to access our service. And recently we found out this semester is quite demanding, overwhelming to our service. And the first presenting issues is academic, serious mental health problem, and problem with relationships. And of course, maybe the uniqueness of Centennial College. We're in GTA, the core, and we have the intersectionality piece. A lot of students is racialized people identified with different challenges, cultural, gender, language, poverty issue, disability related issue. And generally just, I think of like last month, I look at it, I found out the back-to-back sections, I have 83% of my section actually have with BIPOC student. And we take the approach of anti-oppressive. So we review the language, be sensitive culturally, getting the cultural formulation questions to think about and talk about how those cultural value, community, the experience, the lived experience, all those things, that how that impact their mental health, impacting how they experience right now, and get the support for them. And Carla, I don't know, you want to share or?
Yeah, I'll just finish off with this slide, Mona.
Yes.
So with the impact of COVID, we know that it has disproportionately affected BIPOC students, and our institution, Centennial College, is one of the most diverse post-secondary institutions in Canada. And really, in terms of our work within Centennial College broadly, but more specifically within counseling and our health and wellness and peer listener support, is enhancing our equity lens in working with BIPOC students, making sure that we are maintaining the intersectionality and just supporting well-being as students move towards their educational and career goals.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to say thank you to the panelists for taking the time today to be part of this webinar. And so for our first topic, I just let us start with why it's important for BIPOC folks to receive mental health supports.
I'll start. It was interesting when I received the question, because I was looking at it, it's like, we don't often ask why is it important for people in general to receive, mental health supports, right? Like, it's just given. So it's very interesting that we would kind of phrase it in such a way that why is it important? It's important because it's important for everybody else. If we're thinking about people and their humanity and the different identities that makes them up, whether, irrespective of their gender identity, their religion, their background, their race, etc. Like, mental health is something that should be a base in terms of access to it, right? For everyone. So I think that I would have liked to say, why isn't it as available, as responsive to the need of BIPOC? That's what I would have liked to kind of reshape that question to be. But in terms of, like, from my perspective, like, and in terms of my background, so that I can, like, as a social worker, like, the question itself, like, because there's a need. That is why it needs to, and then there is the multi-layered challenges that individual from various communities, because we all talked about intersectionality, the various ways people present, and how that can, in a system that is not built for them, right, and their needs, that is also, a source of trauma, a source of anxiety, a source of sometimes many challenges. So there is more of a need to kind of look at the existing, right? And who are we centering when we talk about, mental health support? So it's important because not only from, like, everybody else who needs, like, dominant, like, to receive support, mental health support, so does the BIPOC. And the needs, my question is, why doesn't it be responsive to the needs of BIPOC? students. And that's how I would like to kind of look at it.
Yeah, so from a student perspective, I definitely understand not feeling supported with regards to mental health. And unfortunately, a lot of my peers feel the same way. And that does translate to your academics, because if you don't feel supported in your mental health, then your academics take a decline, unfortunately. And so similar to what Lula was saying, other people have support, so it should be a question of why don't we also? And we have seen that like the more mental health supports the BIPOC students have, the better that they do overall. Like that's outside of academic institutions and within those academic institutions. So it's really important to make sure that people feel supported, also because in feeling supported, you feel welcome and you're more readily available to go to the resources that you that are geared towards you. So it's really important to make sure that we have those mental supports for BIPOC students around post-secondary and afterwards as well.
I additionally agree with what both Lula and Shanicia said. I do think one thing to mention when the question was asked specifically about like racialized students is a lot of communities frown upon like therapy and mental health for their family members. And because of, like you said, the way institutions are set up that create trauma for people, and then the generational trauma that comes down, I think it's important to empower people and let them know that there are supports out there for them, and that it's not bad to get supports no matter what their cultures may believe.
I so deeply agree with everything that's been said. And I also think that for me at least, thinking as a staff member and contract faculty member at a university, there is a responsibility to provide accessible supports, to be proactive, to recognize needs and then figure out ways to meet them, to recognize that there are obstacles for students to access the services that are deeply rooted in all kinds of contexts, and to find ways to remove those obstacles, transform those services, and create those spaces. I mean, the program that I'm involved in is a collaborative program that brought together people from academic advising, academic skills, student affairs and student retention, the Center for Human Rights, Equity, and Accessibility. And part of it was recognizing that the complex needs, the huge challenges that students were facing, that reactive measures like waiting for students to come to us to book appointments, and siloed measures where students get referred from one place to another but don't necessarily get integrated or holistic supports, were not enough and were failing students. And so kind of trying to really find creative ways to transform that context.
Anyone else like to add on that? Okay. Carla?
You wanted to move on, I just thought it was fine, but I was just going to certainly add that I agree with all my panelists, and further to what Adam was speaking to, we know that the help-seeking behaviors of BIPOC students are quite different. As Kayla talked about, there's significant stigmatization of mental health supports as opposed to more mainstream culture. There's also the cultural stigmatization of mental health, and there can also be significant trauma or previous uncomfortable experiences of accessing mental health. We know that systems can further impact oppression. It can further negatively impact individuals seeking help, and then individuals no longer want to reach out for help. And so in a post-secondary setting, we have a responsibility to critically evaluate how students are accessing supports, how can they get mental health resources. We're working from a place of no door is the wrong door at Centennial College, and so that students, wherever, like whether it be financial aid, and they're talking about financial stress and feeling worried about their well-being, that there's a place for that financial aid office person to support that student.
So let's sort of transition to everyone's experiences on supporting BIPOC students. Specifically, I kind of want to look into what are the challenges that you are facing when supporting BIPOC students, and also the gaps in services that you've noticed.
So I would say that some supporting like BIPOC students, we support specifically like Black students. Some of the challenges is that like you can have all of these like services to give the students, but sometimes they don't show up. So then it's kind of hard to really like support them if like they don't really like come. And then gaps in our services, I would say at like Trent, is not having enough like staff to kind of support all the students. So for like example, we have one racialized therapist on campus. And then if you think about one person to the amount of students, like BIPOC students who have on campus, like it could be like a lot of like stress on like that one person. So if we were to then add like more staff, like I feel like it would benefit the students greatly.
Yeah, I just want to share for food, like exactly the need is all there, right? And yes, there's students that they may have experienced so hesitate to come again, or there's a lot of barriers. So like Centennial, our department is trying to break all the barriers and bring our service to them and make it as accessible as that will be. And we also try to do some more proactive thing. But the limitation really is the manpower. And also like we are doing good in my belief, because like among my colleagues, like just talking about the counselors, we have like 62% racialized people. That is, I feel like it's a quite high percentage. However, we still find that we need more because it's still underrepresented exactly to our own population of the whole student population, because we have like half of our students kind of international student, plus a lot of domestic students, they are having the immigration background, right? The other piece is, I think we found out, especially this academic year, a lot of the mental health, quite serious cases, complex cases coming in, urgent cases there. And we really need something like urgent care support that we can do it, right? Because everyone is already packed with sections. And that is the manpower resources that to provide the urgent care at the right time to do the immediate thing, right? And the other thing I found out that is like the BIPOC student, they may have the different understanding about mental health. I believe we need to take a step back to understand how they understand it first, and then also helping them to know what is the resources or understanding out there. I found out that that is a piece of disconnect, or we're not able to do some work over this kind of topics. I don't know if, like, for example, something wellness promotion group or any proactive program that can fit in that gap. That's just some from my experience to share.
And I'm just going to confirm or collaborate with my technical support person, Sister Mona, in my workplace. It is around resources. So whether it be community and referring students for LGBTQ, trans supports, BIPOC supports, racialized supports, it's a long waiting list or a long waiting time to connect students with supports. And that is definitely a gap. Like in our perfect world, there would not be the wait time there is for a student exploring gender identity and needing more concrete supports in terms of how long they have to wait. In our concrete world, in our perfect world, a student wouldn't be waiting for ethno-specific counseling support and mental health support. So that is certainly a big part of the gaps in service. And part of the challenges would be getting that ongoing feedback in the way of students and BIPOC students. So we are, we're going to be starting looking at Black students here at Centennial College. We're looking at some consultations, but just having more opportunity to engage with our students, because our projects are very much from a place of our passion as a social worker in Mona's case, a registered psychotherapist in my case, and it's projects we take on and they're at the corner of our desk. They're on top of everything else that we're doing. So that is one of the significant challenges, having more dedicated staffing and time to these areas, in addition to our current staff complement, would definitely help in addressing those challenges. And finally, I saw someone put in the chat if we can share our slides, and absolutely, we're happy to. So we'll work with Nicole and Emily to get them out.
Just to add to everything else, that in terms of gaps, etc. So like experience, as I've been a BIPOC student, and now I'm a mother of a BIPOC student who's trying to navigate academia and what it means to be a student in a system that wasn't created for you. So I think when you talked about challenges, one of the things I like always right away comes to me, it's like the structure that is centering like the dominant narrative, right, was not built for the BIPOC communities. So the service delivery is based on that. So in terms of service that we're trying to provide, at times like it's an add-on. Oh, what about diversity? What about equity? What about, so it's like an afterthought. It's great that people are thinking about it right now. However, like the service delivery model that exists is based on that, colonial, dominant white narrative of what who is the default. So as my role, one of the questions I asked, so my role, as I said, is student equity, diversity, inclusivity. So I talk to students, etc. And many of the BIPOC students were saying that service providers, we want more service providers that look like us, that understand. Why do I have to keep explaining things and having a challenge in understanding, like, my perspective? I have to explain all the time, right? So it's like, because of the base upon which our service delivery was, created, right? So when we're doing a survey, I ask a lot of my colleagues, and it's like, okay, so when you're doing this survey, who are you seeing as your audience? Who is your default? When you're creating a program, when you're trying to do a survey, when you're doing an activity, who is it? Because we say, oh, we want an active role. It's like, okay, it's outside, you're walking. What about different abled? How is it not built into it? So one of the challenges for BIPOC is how you're going backwards. The program exists, or the activity exists, and people are like, oh, come to it as it is. But when you come to it, it's not feeding you, it's not seeing you, it's not responding to your individual need. Then you fail, right? And it's like, okay, then I'm not going to access. So then when you have programs, I think Jalen, you talked about not accessing, because then you have to rebuild the trust, because when you access the first time, you were disappointed. So then when you have a wonderful program that meets the need, people are not accessing, it's like, what's the point? And so it's like another building of trust and creating that opportunity. It's like, no, it's for you. I think, Adam, you talked about your program. It's like belonging. No, you belong here. The programs are for you. Yes, the university is here for you. But it's a lot of another layer of, people talked about, I attended something and they talked about how, medical system and how it wasn't built for example, Black communities, right? Not to make them better. But then when people access it, you expect to, when you see a doctor, take your clothes off and be vulnerable when you don't have the trust. And these are the same structures that caused you harm. So now the trust building. So it's kind of like, it's a lot more work. And when you're having these conversations around what else can we do and who do we center in our services, in our conversations, in our programming, in our, in academia in general, who are we centering? Who is that youth that we want to come in, right? A lot of time, if you ask people who they envision, they're not often international student, BIPOC, or, gender diverse, neurodiverse. That's not the person that you build in the program. So that becomes very challenging when you're trying to provide support.
Wonderful words, Lula. I was wondering if we can continue on that topic of engagement and building that trust with students. I was wondering if we can discuss, it's sort of related to Renee's question of sort of engaging the student community, and also how do you build that trust with students so you get them into those programs that are meant for them?
I can share a stumble around how we designed our program. When we first started conceptualizing You Belong Here, we were very dedicated to a vision of doing some focus groups and some research with students beforehand to really design the program well. And then there were some pressures institutionally around when to launch, and here's some money you can access, but in order to access it, you have to access it by this point. And we skipped the focus group stage because we wanted to be able to pay our student co-facilitators. That felt really important to us. If they're going to be doing that labor, that emotional labor, that was essential. And so we justified skipping that stage of engagement to kind of access those resources and so on. And I think it was a fundamental error on our part. And as we've kind of moved through, this is the first year that we're running the program. And as we moved through the fall term, we really saw some errors in how we'd thought about things, how we'd structured things. And so as that term unfolded, we made a point of doing more outreach and asking better questions and engaging some student voices and so on. But if I was to share like one big regret about our program, it was that we let those pressures around timeframes and money change what we knew was the better way to approach designing the program.
So kind of like to go off of that, I think it's important to rejig all the time, look back and ask students their opinion. Something that worked for students previously may not work for the incoming group of students. So it's really important to go back to the students and be like, what do you guys need? How can we support you? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these initiatives are for students. And obviously I'm a student now, but a couple of years from now, I won't be in this position. So you can't take what I'm saying now for like the next 10 years. So it's really important to go back and be like, okay, how are students engaging in other groups and how can we kind of mend that so that they are able to engage with our group and our resources that we're able to outsource. So it's really important to like, you know, get feedback, but also ensure that you're getting frequent feedback as well.
Lula, you were about to say something?
No, just to, build on that, it's true, right? Going back. So I have the privilege of, having the title, student equity, diversity, inclusivity. So, and it's a position that I'm the first person holding it, so I can shape it whatever and however I want it to be until the powers that be say it's not what they wanted, but I'll deal with that. But the idea behind going back to the students, for many of the people around who are social workers or community decides what they want. So when Dean of Students said, oh, we want a program for students, that's like, okay, well, nice that you want that, Dean of Students, lovely, but what do the students want? What does it look like? So going and reconnecting, I think you just talked about it. What does it look, what do you need? Because the students change, their needs change. What is it, how do I connect with you? So I have the privilege of being able to go back. So I go to student groups, I basically send emails and say, can I just show up in one of your meetings? Is it okay? Like, can I just, I'll introduce myself, like, I just want to connect. And that conversation, right, in terms of seeing you. And some places, like, how I look might be a hindrance, and some places where how I look could be a positive, right? In terms of seeing someone who is, I'm genuinely here to hear what you have to say, and I will take it back. So part of my job is to hear the students and bring it back to the Dean of Students, because under Dean of Students is the counseling, the social workers, the health center, resident services. So I bring it back and say, hey, we're not honoring this identity or this intersectionality. How do we do better? And that, having that inform the trainings that the staff receive. So like kind of looping it in, but you need to know what they want. We can't just keep saying, this is what a BIPOC student looks like, because we're forgetting their own, we talk about intersectionality, but we forget about the diversity within the BIPOC community and the diversity within it. Their needs are different. So going back, because every year looks different too. What do you need? What does it look like? What do I need to do to make this a safe space for you? Not me saying, putting up, a rainbow flag, and I have a dream catcher and a Martin Luther King picture, and I'm done. My space is welcoming. It's like, nice. Have you talked to the students that are accessing your services? If they feel comfortable with that big screen or that big barrier between them and you, or with the questions you're asking, or your, the service when how you're talking to them, or the lack of smile when they show up, and lack of welcome. Like, have you considered all these pieces? So I think the evaluation, going back.
Or you're not taking your face off the computer, you're attached to the computer, and you're not looking at that person who is marginalized and who has multiple interactions that have been oppressive and not supportive and not being listened to. And then you're saying, oh yes, but look at my paraphernalia, look at how I am. Yes. Yeah.
And as we approach the 50-minute mark, I think this would be a great time for question and answers. So I'm just going to ask this question from one of our attendees. What do you feel are the barriers preventing access? Services like counseling are available to every student on campus, as far as I know. So is the problem not really accessibility, but lack of comfort, lack of trust, lack of understanding of what the services are? If that is the case, then the issue for institutions to address is not really accessibility.
I do think lack of comfort, lack of trust, lack of understanding. I do think we touched on a bit of this, like lack of resources for people. I know at some schools, I've gone to a few different schools, there you can only get a certain amount of sessions. So you start to talk with someone, you start to feel comfortable, you start to open up, and they're like, I'm sorry, like the way the system's set up, I can't help you anymore. I have to refer you outward where you have to pay or whatever it may be. And then you have to have these conversations all over again with a new person. And I just think it's not necessarily like really helpful. It's just kind of a band-aid solution where sometimes people need that connection with someone who can continue to help them throughout whatever their issues may be and build that trust and understanding. And also, like when I say lack of resources, like Jalen mentioned, like only having one person of color. I think also having someone you can relate to and not having to repeat certain things and explain things to someone who's supposed to be coaching you.
I would echo that and say that I think that in many different ways, the expectation for students to do the emotional labor of explaining the challenges and contexts they're facing so that they can then get support from the professionals on those challenges and contexts is, I think, an incredibly unfair burden. And I think that from my perspective, one of the, things that need to happen to improve programs is to drastically improve the kind of training, professional development that staff are doing, and not just in mental health support roles, but broader in terms of student services, in terms of faculty, and to also strengthen and diversify the people that students are interacting with. I certainly work at a very predominantly white institution and hear often from students that I'm meeting with that they do not feel reflected in the people around them, whether it be staff or faculty or both. And so I think that definitely impacts that level of trust, of engagement. If you don't feel understood or reflected in the people that you're engaging with, it makes it incredibly difficult to feel like you belong in those spaces, you deserve to access those supports.
We have another question here from Victoria. With regards to gaps in services and supporting BIPOC students, what are ways you have collaborated with external services to assist the projects that are in addition to your main staff responsibilities? How might we increase opportunities to work with BIPOC communities outside of the education system who want to help close the gaps?
Well, I can speak for Trent. So during Black History Month, for example, we worked with the Diverse Nature Collective to do some initiatives, as well as some Peterborough Community Race Relations as well to do some events throughout the month. So I think continuously doing those events throughout the school year and not just limiting it to Black History Month is a good way to start. Having the conversation, and also in that way, it makes it so that students are aware of the community resources that they're able to access outside of just Trent and what Trent is able to promote. So I think it's really important to do these things year round and be intentional when you're doing it as well, and be intentional with the group that you're doing it with as well. So if you're doing like a nature walk, are you doing that for wellness? Is it catered towards somebody? Is it promoted throughout the community and just Trent? Or just the education section, so that students are able to see outside of education, they're also supported in being their own self and having that safe space as well.
I think in terms of the kind of thinking about the community context, that kind of having a more holistic perspective on what mental health support and what support means, and also recognizing that even if as an institution you're doing some great work around diversity and inclusion, the communities in which you're based may not feel all that welcoming, and in fact may have really challenging contexts when it comes to racism and colonialism and the kind of violence that students may face in those communities. And And so I think that, there's obviously the positive aspects around connecting with community and building some shared services and conversations and things like that. And I think as a part of that conversation needs to be a really candid conversation around the broader community context in which students move, live, shop, interact, and how to transform those to be safer spaces.
I know for our team, we do, for example, connect with Alberta Health Services, and they send a social worker just to add more services. And it's a BIPOC social worker that can meet with students too. So an added layer of how do we include so that the students know that their network of support is not just limited to the 4 social workers or the 5 that are on campus. So we're trying to encourage that piece. The other thing is a lot of our team, for example, social workers, refer out. If they are not meeting the need or the person is identifying a specified, they try to increase their knowledge and their training, etc. But if there's someone who's saying, I want something different, or I'm looking for this specific, they do, and they look at the community to refer out to therapists or social workers that represent or can hear the needs or fill that need that the students identifying. So we keep looking at various ways that we can connect with community, because it's like community within community. Students go out eventually. So we want them to make sure that even when they go beyond our walls, that there are other people outside.
I think we have time for one more quick question. What advice can you offer groups that BIPOC communities have historically had mistrust towards, example, healthcare, policing, who want to deliver better services and supports?
I think training and understanding are really big things. It's going to take a long time, especially if we're thinking of healthcare, like how long it takes to become a doctor, to get more people of color. As physicians, I know it's slowly happening, but for the people who are already there and can impact people immediately, just training them on understanding different cultural needs, understanding decisions that people make, and just, I think sometimes people just feel misheard when they go to the doctors. They just feel like they're being pushed towards one thing. And just understanding sometimes the reasonings people have behind their choices, and just building trust that way would be a great start. I think that's very surface level starting place, but you have to start somewhere.
I think when Adam mentioned talking about what's mental health, etc. It's like, okay, so instead of understanding that the community has their own way of defining certain things, so being willing to listen and engage in conversation and not assuming this is what community engagement looks like, because this is how our unit or our organization thinks community engagement. Every community has their own way of engaging, connecting with people. So being open to kind of learning and looking at the community from a strength base, like what does it look like to engage? What does it look like to be part of that community or to work with that community, as opposed to these are the standards engagement that we have. This is what we do. This is how we like sort of kind of breaking away from that and actually connecting with people, having conversation and asking, what do you need for me to connect with you? I don't know if that's a radical kind of piece. Ask might be one of the questions.
Anyone wanting to add on to that? It's a bit of a loaded question because it's not that we can solve it in one day, but anything helps in terms of discussion points. Or if anyone in our audience wants to add. Oh, Carla.
I just wanted to, I don't know if it's necessarily an addition, but it really, really, really is about relationship building and about understanding our shared humanity. So whether it is around inviting a healthcare worker to be a part of a student run event, and so there could be that this is our experience, this is our world, and having that person being equity minded to be able to hear some good feedback, but also some not so good feedback around interacting with healthcare and being able to be present and hear that experience and talk to us around being a racialized person, being a Black person, and not feeling safe, feeling negatively judged, and be able to hear that, hold that, and respond. I think that's a really key part, and providing education to people working within these various systems around how they're engaging with community.
All right, and on that last note, we are now nearing the end of the webinar. Before we log off, I would like to thank the panelists for attending and for putting up with my number of emails. I would also like to thank the audience for registering and being with us for the hour. Our next webinar will take place on March 16th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. It will be about the Indigenous Students Needs Assessment for Ontario campuses. Registration for that event is on our website. And lastly, we appreciate if you fill out the survey that will be sent out to you momentarily. Have a good week, everyone.